So explain to us how the consciousness, conscious part and the subconscious part of brain function from a neuroscience perspective.
Yeah. Well, you couldn't have asked this question 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
You weren't allowed, actually.
Okay. We were not allowed?
No.
Okay.
You don't ask that question. Not allowed. Okay.
Right.
20 years ago, that would have been the end of your job. Okay. However.
End of the job?
Yeah. Consciousness was not allowed to be discussed. It was not scientific. It was not something you did. You did get money for it. It was not on the plate. Right? But in the last 10 years, it's just things are changing. Consciousness, yoga, that whole thing. Things are changing, and now people study consciousness. Now, of course, they really don't understand consciousness because there's two forms of consciousness as a background. There is, I am conscious of this, right? So if I have an object like my hand, I'm conscious of it. So that's consciousness.
Right.
But there's another kind of consciousness, which means if all of this disappears and I'm still awake and there's no objects, then that's consciousness too, because I'm still awake.
Right.
But there's no wakefulness of any object, space, or time. That's pure consciousness, Atma, this silence deep inside. So there's actually two forms of consciousness. One primary form, consciousness in its pure state, and then consciousness when it takes on a form that we call an object, object of thought or bunny rabbit or whatever it is.
Right.
Modern science is on the level of the relative.
Right.
They're looking in at the brain, looking in at consciousness, right? And all they see is objects, and we're aware of them. So their world is consciousness of objects.
Right.
So if you don't have an object, they don't study it, okay? They don't think it exists because unless they have the experience of consciousness without space and time, I mean, that's not possible. I mean, you need space and time to live and to breathe and to have anything.
The dimensions.
Yeah, you have to have all of this to be aware, okay? But they don't have the experience of transcending.
Right.
So if they did, then they'd probably think twice about what they do. But however, what's happened the last 10 years is people starting to now dive into the brain because they know that something's coming up.
Right.
They've known that a long time. There's just stuff underneath there, right? Freud, right? The whole thing.
Yeah.
It's stuff coming up, right? And it's a mixed up, and you know, it's all messy in there, okay?
Right.
And that's why they weren't allowed to do it because it's messy. Unless you're getting paid as a psychiatrist, and then you make money and still don't have it. Okay. So there's a surface, and they started working there, and all of a sudden they realized, geez, what's underneath the surface? So now they're studying the brain, and they're asking what happens just before you're aware of something.
Right.
So it's a classic experiment. If I do like that very fast, you see it, you hear it, okay?
Right.
But if I go like that very fast and then I do something else, I can mask it. And then I say, did he see this or did I get masked, right? I go like this. Say, I know all you see is my hand.
Right.
Now for a second, for a fraction of a second, you did this, but this is what dominated.
Right.
Now the question is, did this get in? And if it did get in, how far did it get in? And what effect did it leave behind?
Right.
Because this is obvious. Yeah, I saw the hand, and yeah, I like it or don't like it. What about this?
Right.
So now they can study it, and you can go all the way back in, you know, and they have sequence of what's going on, and in the brain, the sequence. What happens is information flows in, and then it gets, let's say, visual information. You see this thing? Okay. It gets in the back of the brain, and then it moves forward, and then starts integrating, and the whole thing like that.
Right.
And within about a third of a second or less, your whole brain has been figuring out this thing.
Whoa, third of a second.
Less than a third of a second.
Okay.
You're not aware of it.
Right.
You have no idea. But the brain's got the whole thing.
Right.
Right. It's going to say, I like it, I don't like it, I'm going to get it or not get it, I'm going to buy it tomorrow or not buy it tomorrow. It's worked out the whole scenario.
Okay.
Right. But you don't know it. And then it just goes away.
And that's purely programming, what happened over there.
Yes, it's the whole brain, everything gets into the brain.
Right.
But some things get into your awareness.
Right.
It takes about 3 to 4 tenths of a second to get into what they call avalanche mode. That information got to enough parts of the brain, in particular prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex go, that's what I want. I'm going to put my attention there. And then it just ignites everything. They also call it ignition.
Right.
You get this ignition, and then wham, into your awareness, you get this.
Right.
But just before that, no, it was not there. So everything's getting in.
Right.
Everything gets in. You walk down the road, you see everything.
Right.
Your brain sees everything.
Right.
You see every tree, every car, every face, pretty much, right? I mean, it's kind of a muddle.
Right.
But you only see that, and then you only see that, and you only see that, because we're sequential and limited, but the brain's analyzing everything.
So without even seeing, we are seeing so many things which
the brain is seeing. You're saying we, but you mean the brain. The brain is cognizant of a lot.
Okay.
Also the body at the same time. How your big toe's doing.
Right.
You haven't thought about it, but now you are.
Yeah.
Right? But it was keeping track of your big toe.
Right.
Right. And the only reason to know that because if all of a sudden something happened to your big toe, you know the difference. Only you know the difference because you knew what was going on before. It's keeping track of everything. If there's some change, it says, oh, there's a difference, I need to tend to it.
So that's why you call it the CEO.
Yes, it's in charge of everything. Anything important anyway. I mean, you can get rid of it and you can just say, oh. So, but that's not life, that's funny rabbits.
So, how can human beings access the subconscious part of the brain? And when the active stimulus, the impulses from outside, it's in a way programming our psyche, our deeper sense of self.
Right.
How can a person?
We get conditioned.
Programmed.
Yes. We're all conditioned.
We're all conditioned.
Right. You grow up in a family, and that's how you think. You grow up in a society, that's how you think.
Right.
You watch TV, that's how you think.
Right. Is there conditioning which is coming from maybe prior sequences of birth if you follow the Hindu Vedic culture? Yeah.
Modern science will tell you that what your grandfather and great grandfather do is influencing you right now.
Genetics,
yes. Right. There's the real genetics, and then they used to think that it was just the genes, your eye color, how tall you're going to be, muscles, or whatever. Right. But now they know that on your genes there's all these little tags, which means that this is how we're going to use my genes. Right. Which means if I do this, I'm going to be a really good cobbler, shoemaker. Okay. If I do this, I'm going to be a really good computer scientist. If I do this, I'm going to be a great housewife or whatever. Right. The point is that all those tags are on those genes, and they are on your genes. They go through the cycle. Right. Not just the genes themselves, but the tags also. This is epigenetics.
Epigenetics.
Right. Epi means on top of or in addition. So, like epidermis. So this is the stuff that's on top of your genes, which is saying this is the best way to program them. This is the best kind of life. Right. So these are influences. So we're born, we're influenced. These singers come out of nowhere. But somewhere in the past, there was some real singing going on there, Right. And they may not know that, but there was some possibility there. So we're living a lot of the past. It's just flowing through us. And what we do with it, it has a tendency to make our life easier or not. If we go against it, it's a little harder path. Right. But if we go with it, then it makes things easier because we're already programmed that way. All right, so they were programmed and conditioned.
So, how can a person tap into the subconscious? And is it even accessible?
Well, the subconscious is by definition unconscious. Yeah. So, if you want to be a psychiatrist and get people to kind of dream and drift in there and kind of fool around, you can spend a lot of money but minimal effects. Otherwise, we'd have a great society, right? Psychiatrists would be everywhere and everywhere would be pure.
The regression therapies you're talking about.
Yeah, all this stuff. There's some little effects sometimes, but usually it's disaster or causes more problems. Okay.
Right.
So the idea here is that we don't want the subconscious.
Right.
We don't want all this. The subconscious is there because of all the stress.
Right.
So theoretically, if you go into the subconscious, you're going to be confronted with all this nonsense.
The junk, which is lying around.
Which is making. See, all right. At the base of your mind, the base of your awareness, is that pure consciousness, the source of thought, and then thoughts bubble up to the surface, and then we go, oh, I got a thought.
Right.
Below that is all the subconscious or the unconscious. Okay. So now every thought coming out has perfect, beautiful, pure intentions.
Right.
Because that's all the self has.
Right.
The universe only has good coming out of it.
Right.
Even if it looks bad. Okay? So good coming out, but what happens by the time it gets to the surface, it can be completely distorted, which is usually the case.
Right.
This is called human frailty and human mistakes and everything else.
Right.
Because between here and here, there's a lot of stuff that's not quite wired right.
Our own definitions, our own ways of...
how we biases, how we look at things, how we interpret. Because everything's an interpretation.
Right.
Stuffing goes in, the interpretation goes in, what do you get out? So it can be garbage in, it can be garbage out. Right. Or it can be pure in and pure out.
Right.
So that pure in and pure out depends on what's going through. And you can think of the wires in the brain, the synapses aren't quite perfectly coherent, or you can think of it like an ocean that's all muddy, and something's trying to get through it, okay?
Right.
And lots of things all at the same time. We have many thoughts and desires, and they're conflicting and fighting, and I want this, but I don't want that, and I like it, I don't like. And then by the time you get a service, oh my God, what am I going to do now, okay? So the idea is, psychiatrists and psychologists are trying to help you penetrate, and also some of the post-traumatic stress therapies, they're trying to get you to go in there and fix things.
Right.
You can't fix it that way.
Okay.
And if you do it all, it doesn't work very well, and it's very slow, and it's painful.
Right.
It can be very painful. Okay?
Right.
And so people don't like it. So and it doesn't really work. Like I said, if it did, we'd be in great shape.
Right.
the only way to get from here to here and get rid of the subconscious is to actually go through it, not go into it and analyze it. Well, what are you going to do?
Right.
The psychiatrist sits there for hours helping you analyze. What?
Hypnotherapies and regression sessions.
Yes. I mean, it's just. I mean, they're well intended, and there's some little effects and some help and stuff like that, but it's not the big picture. It's not transcending, going through the whole range of the mind, getting to where all the memory is, all the intelligence, all the creativity and happiness and bliss and energy. And then what happens is that eventually the brain gets better, gets more orderly, it throws off all that stress and strain, gets wired better, and then there is no subconscious in that way. You know, it's this things still take some time to come out, but you can be awake to the whole thing, and it's just purity. So I don't recommend people going in
and analyzing,
trying to fix. It's an impossibility, because who can figure out what synaptic configuration or what set of thoughts have to be fixed in what way? I mean, over how many centuries of whatever. Okay, it's almost impossible. It's like taking a library, blowing it up, and saying, now let's read the literature. Where do you start? Okay? I mean, it's all there, but it's like, whoa, you know?